The rain came down in sheets, a Pacific Northwest deluge that turned Seattle's streets into rivers of black glass. I gripped the steering wheel of my beat-up Honda Civic, the wipers thrashing uselessly against the torrent. It was 9:47 p.m., and I was racing back from the tech firm where I worked part-time, my heart still pounding from the near disaster of the night. The server outage had nearly cost us $1 million client, and I'd spent 3 hours hunched over a keyboard, sweat beading on my forehead, untangling code to save the deal. My boss had called it a career-defining moment, but all I could think about was the family dinner I'd missed. Again, I'm William, 25, a computer science senior at the University of Washington, scraping by to finish my degree. To save money, I'd been living at home with my parents in a modest craftsman house in Fremont, paying them $1,800, 0 cents a month in rent. That's right, rent, not a favor. I worked 20 hours a week debugging code and spent the rest of my time buried in textbooks, trying to claw my way toward a future that didn't involve living paycheck to paycheck. Meanwhile, my sister Abigail, 31, lounged in the same house rent-free, her life a revolving door of drama and failed marriages. 3 divorces by 31, and somehow she was still the star of the family show. As I navigated the slick roads, my phone buzzed on the passenger seat, a text from Mom. Missed dinner again, whatever. The words stung, sharp and dismissive, like a slap I should have seen coming. I'd texted her earlier, explaining the work emergency, but it didn't matter. It never did. Growing up, it was always the Abigail show, 24/7, 365 days a year. When I was 12, my parents canceled my Little League championship game to drive her to an audition for a toothpaste commercial. She didn't get the part, but they took out a second mortgage to fund her acting career, which amounted to a few blurry headshots and a walk-on role in a community theater flop. Me, I started bussing tables at 16 to buy my own sneakers and school supplies, while Abigail got new dresses and private acting coaches. The rain battered the windshield as I pulled onto our street, the familiar row of craftsman homes glowing faintly under streetlights. I was exhausted, my eyes burning from staring at code, my stomach growling because I hadn't eaten since noon. All I wanted was to crash in my bed, but the moment I stepped into the house, I knew something was wrong. The air felt heavy, like the prelude to a storm worse than the one outside. Boxes lined the hallway, my boxes, my books, my clothes, my laptop charger, all haphazardly stacked like they'd been swept off a shelf in a hurry. I froze, my wet sneakers squeaking on the hardwood. The living room was dark, but a sliver of light spilled from my bedroom door. Voices echoed, my dad's low growl and Abigail's high-pitched whine. I crept closer, my pulse ticking up. The door was ajar, and there they were. Dad with a tape measure, stretching it across my bedroom wall, and Abigail pointing at the corner where my desk used to be. My bed was gone, the mattress propped against the wall like discarded junk. My desk was shoved to the side, my textbooks and notes scattered across it like confetti. "What the hell is this?" I said, my voice cutting through the room like a blade. Dad barely glanced at me, his flannel shirt stretched tight across his shoulders as he jotted down measurements. "Abigail needs the space," he said, not even looking up. "She's turning this into her art studio. You can move your stuff to the garage." The garage. The unheated, uninsulated garage where Dad ran his table saw at 6 a.m. every weekend. No bathroom, no heat, just a concrete floor and a single flickering bulb. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that made Abigail flinch. She stood there in her designer yoga pants, her blonde hair pulled into a perfect messy bun, looking at me like I was an inconvenience she'd rather not deal with. "An art studio?" I said, my voice rising. "For what? Your Etsy shop that sold 3 candles last year?" Abigail's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into that familiar smirk. "It's for my wedding, William. I need space for my vision boards and dress fittings. You wouldn't understand. You're too busy playing with computers." Her wedding, of course. Abigail's 4th trip down the aisle, this time with Ethan, a guy I'd met exactly once at a tense Thanksgiving dinner. He seemed nice enough, a quiet accountant, who probably didn't know what he was signing up for, but Abigail had already planned a blowout wedding at a vineyard in Woodinville, complete with a $10,000 0 cents dress and a string quartet. Apparently, Ethan's salary couldn't cover her dream, so my parents were footing the bill. Before I could respond, Mom stormed in, her face flushed, clutching a stack of papers. She slapped them down on my desk, sending a pen clattering to the floor. "You need to sign these," she said, her voice tight. "It's a $15,000 0 cents loan for Abigail's wedding. Ethan's doing his best, but she deserves this." I stared at the papers, the words blurring together. A loan! In my name, for Abigail's wedding. The room spun for a second, and I gripped the doorframe to steady myself. "You're kidding, right?" I said, my voice low, dangerous. "You want me to take on $15,000, 0 cents, in debt for her 4th wedding?" Mom's eyes flashed with that familiar mix of guilt and defiance. "Family comes first, William. You've always been so selfish. Abigail's happiness is worth it." "Worth it?" I snapped. "She's 31, Mom. She's been married 3 times and everyone's ended in disaster. Statistically, this one's got a better chance of crashing before the honeymoon than making it to the altar." Abigail gasped, clutching her chest like I'd stabbed her. "You're just jealous," she spat. "You're jealous because I've found love, and you're too busy with your stupid degree to have a life." Dad stepped forward, his face red, his finger jabbing at my chest. "Watch your mouth, William. This is about family. You owe us." "Owe you?" I said, stepping closer, my voice shaking with rage. "I've been paying you $1,800, 0 cents a month to live in my own childhood home. I work, I study, I keep my head down, and you're kicking me out for her?" The argument exploded from there. Mom started shouting about loyalty, Abigail screamed that I was ruining her life, and Dad kept nodding like a bobblehead backing them up. I stood my ground, refusing to sign the loan papers, refusing to move to the garage like some stray dog they could shove outside when it suited them. That's when it happened. Mom grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin, and tried to force a pen into my hand. I yanked away, harder than I meant to, and she stumbled back, knocking into my desk. My laptop slid off, hitting the floor with a sickening crack. Dad was in my face in an instant, his breath hot, his finger now practically bruising my chest. "That's it," he growled. "You've disrespected this family for the last time. You got 10 minutes to pack what you can carry and get out." Mom nodded, tears streaming down her face, playing the victim like she always did. Abigail stood behind them, smirking, her arms crossed. I looked at them, my family, the people who were supposed to have my back, and saw strangers. Strangers who'd used me, dismissed me, and now discarded me. "Fine," I said, my voice cold. "I'm done." I grabbed my backpack, stuffing it with my laptop, cracked screen and all, my passport, and a few clothes. But as they argued over who'd get my desk, I slipped into Dad's office down the hall. I'd always suspected something was off with the family finances. Dad's tech startup always seemed to do well, new clients, big contracts, but whenever I asked for help with tuition, they cried poor. I opened his desk drawer, my hands shaking, and found a stack of tax forms with my name on them, forms I'd never seen. I snapped photos with my phone, then grabbed a couple of USB drives from the drawer. I didn't know what was on them, but I had a gut feeling they'd matter. As I headed for the door, Abigail blocked my path, her smirk wider now. "Don't forget to send the loan money by next week," she said, like she'd already won. I leaned in close, my voice barely a whisper. "Enjoy your studio, Abigail." Dad followed me to the door, still ranting about family loyalty. As I stepped into the rain, he shouted, "Don't come back, William. You're no longer my son." I didn't look back. I got in my car and drove to my friend Jake's apartment in Capitol Hill, the rain blurring the city lights into a haze. Jake let me crash on his couch, no questions asked, but as I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my phone buzzing with angry texts from Mom, I knew this wasn't over. The documents I'd grabbed, the USB drives in my pocket, they were a ticking time bomb. I'd seen enough in those tax forms to know something was seriously wrong. They'd been claiming me as a dependent while charging me rent, which was illegal. And there was more. Something about Abigail being listed as an employee in Dad's company, pulling a $50,000 0 cents salary for a job she'd never done. Tomorrow I'd meet with Jake's roommate, a finance guy who could help me dig into the files. My parents thought they could erase me, throw me out like trash while they bankrolled Abigail's latest fantasy. They thought I'd disappear quietly. They were wrong. I had their secrets now, and from what I'd glimpsed, the IRS would have a field day. This wasn't just about a room or a loan anymore. This was about years of lies, manipulation, and betrayal. And I was just getting started. The rain kept falling outside, a steady drumbeat against the window. I closed my eyes, the weight of the USB drives in my pocket like a promise. What else was hiding in those files? And how deep did this family's deception go? The fluorescent lights in Jake's cramped Capitol Hill apartment flickered as I sat at his kitchen table, my cracked laptop open, and the USB drives plugged in. It was 2 a.m., the city outside quiet, except for the occasional siren slicing through the Seattle night. My hands trembled as I clicked through the QuickBooks files from Dad's tech startup, each new document tightening the knot in my stomach. I'd already found the tax forms claiming me as a dependent while I paid $1,800, 0 cents a month in rent. Illegal, no question. But what I was uncovering now was worse. Much worse. Jake's roommate, Lucas, a junior analyst at a local bank, leaned over my shoulder, his eyes narrowing at the screen. "Holy shit, William," he muttered, pointing at a payroll record. There it was. Abigail, my sister, listed as a marketing consultant for Dad's company, pulling a $50,000 0 cents annual salary for the past 5 years. Abigail, who couldn't keep a barista job for more than 6 months, who spent her days posting Instagram reels about her visionary wedding plans. The same Abigail who is now planning her 4th marriage to Ethan, a guy who thought she was a financial wizard. "This isn't just shady," Lucas said, his voice low. "This is straight-up fraud. Your parents are paying her for a job she doesn't do, and I'd bet my left arm they're writing it off as a business expense." I nodded, my jaw tight. The numbers didn't lie. But the next folder I opened made my blood run cold. Labeled Hudson Accounts, it contained credit card statements. 3 cards, all in my name. I'd never applied for them. One was maxed out at $8,500, 0 cents, with charges for luxury handbags, a spa weekend in Portland, and a deposit for a yacht. A freaking yacht. My parents, who'd cried poor every time I asked for help with tuition, had been using my identity to fund their lifestyle. My credit score, which I'd worked so hard to keep pristine for grad school applications, was probably in the gutter. I slammed the laptop shut and stood, pacing the tiny kitchen. "They've been stealing from me for years," I said, my voice shaking. "Years, Lucas. And they had the nerve to kick me out for not signing a $15,000 0 cents loan for Abigail's wedding." Lucas leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "You need to act fast, man. Freeze your credit, file a police report, and get those cards shut down. If you don't, you're on the hook for this debt." The weight of it hit me like a freight train. I wasn't just fighting for my room or my dignity anymore. This was identity theft, tax fraud, and God knows what else. I grabbed my phone and started calling the credit bureaus, my fingers fumbling as I navigated automated menus. By 4 a.m., I'd frozen my credit with all 3 bureaus and changed my mailing address to Jake's place. No way was I letting Mom and Dad intercept any more mail in my name. But the real gut punch came when I called the utility companies. Gas, electric, water, internet, all in my name, despite me paying rent like a tenant. I'd been their financial pawn, covering their bills while they funneled money into Abigail's fantasy life. I spent the next hour switching every account out of my name, my voice shaking with rage. When the internet company asked why I was making the change, I almost laughed. "Because I'm not the homeowner," I said. "I'm just the idiot who's been paying for it." By dawn, I was exhausted but wired, running on adrenaline and cheap coffee. Lucas suggested I file a police report for the identity theft, but the thought of turning my own parents in made my stomach churn. They'd betrayed me, sure, but they were still my family. Or were they? The memory of Dad's finger jabbing my chest, Mom's crocodile tears, Abigail's smirk, it burned. I pushed it aside and headed to campus for my morning class, but fate had other plans. The elevator in the computer science building was old, creaky, and smelled like burnt coffee. I stepped inside, my backpack heavy with my laptop and those damning USB drives. The doors closed and the elevator lurched upward. Then it stopped. Not a gentle stop, a grinding, metal-on-metal screech that sent my heart into my throat. The lights flickered and the cabin shuddered, dropping an inch before catching. I was trapped. Shit, 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 I muttered, jabbing the emergency button. Nothing. The air felt thick, the walls closing in. I banged on the doors, shouting for help, but the building was quiet. Too early for the usual bustle. My phone had one bar, barely enough to text Jake. Stuck in elevator. Seize building. Help. Minutes dragged like hours. Sweat beaded on my forehead as the cabin groaned again. Another sickening dip. I pictured the cables snapping, the plunge to the basement, my life, my degree, my fight against my family's lies. Couldn't end like this. I forced myself to breathe, slow and steady, and pried at the control panel with my keys. After what felt like forever, I heard shouts from outside. Maintenance workers pried the doors open, revealing I was stuck between floors. They hauled me out, my legs shaky, my heart pounding like a drum. "You're lucky," one of them said, wiping his brow. "This thing's been on its last legs for years." Lucky, right? I stumbled to class, my mind racing. The elevator scare felt like a metaphor for my life. Trapped, teetering on the edge of disaster, with no one to pull me out but myself. I barely heard the professor's lecture on algorithms. All I could think about was the USB drives in my bag and the storm they'd unleash. That afternoon, I met Lucas at a coffee shop near campus. He'd brought his laptop, and we dug deeper into the files. The yacht loan, $30,000, 0 cents, taken out 3 months ago, was just the tip of the iceberg. Dad's company was bleeding money, not because of bad business, but because he was siphoning funds. A $200,000, 0 cents consulting fee to a shell company, first-class tickets to Hawaii for him and Mom. And Abigail's fake salary, year after year, while I scraped by on student loans and part-time gigs. Lucas whistled low. "Your dad's not just screwing you over, William. He's defrauding investors. I bet your grandpa doesn't know half of this." Grandpa. The one person in my family who'd always seemed to see me. He'd been funding Dad's startup for years, believing it was barely breaking even. I texted him, asking to meet. He replied instantly, "Come to my place tomorrow. Bring everything." The next day, I drove to Grandpa's house in Bellevue, the USB drives burning a hole in my pocket. His place was a cozy ranch-style home, filled with photos of our family before everything went to hell. Grandpa sat me down at his dining table, his face lined with worry. I showed him the tax forms, the payroll records, the credit card statements. His hands shook as he flipped through the photos on my phone, his jaw tightening with each new piece of evidence. "They've been lying to me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've poured my retirement into that company, thinking it was struggling. And they're buying yachts?" I nodded, my throat tight. "There's more. They opened credit cards in my name, maxed one out at $8,000, $500, 0 cents, and Abigail, she's been on the payroll as a consultant. She's never worked a day for the company." Grandpa's face hardened, a look I'd never seen before. "I'm taking this to my accountant," he said, "and I'm calling my lawyer. Your father's done." The weight of his words hit me. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about dismantling the house of cards my parents had built. But before I could process it, my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan, Abigail's fiancé. "Can we talk, man to man? Something's off with the wedding." I met Ethan at a dive bar in Fremont, the kind of place where the jukebox played Springsteen and the beer was cheap. He looked wrecked, dark circles under his eyes, his button-down wrinkled. Over a pitcher of IPA, he told me the wedding was falling apart. The vineyard venue had called, saying the final payment was declined, the caterer, the florist, the DJ, all the same story. Dad had promised to handle it, but Ethan wasn't buying it. "I need to know what's going on, William," he said, his voice raw. "Abigail keeps saying it's a banking error, but I'm not an idiot. And then there's her job. She told me she's been the financial administrator for your dad's company for 5 years. Has an accounting degree, but I checked. I took a long sip of beer, weighing my words. Ethan deserved the truth, but dropping it on him felt like lighting a fuse. She's been lying, I said finally. She's not an administrator. She's never worked for the company. They've been paying her $50,000, 0 cents, a year for nothing. And those credit cards, some of the charges are for her wedding. Ethan's face went pale, his hands gripping the table. She lied to me. For 2 years she's been lying about who she is. I nodded, the memory of Abigail's smirk flashing in my mind. I'm sorry, man. I found out the hard way too. He stood, his chair scraping against the floor. I need to talk to her. Now. As he left, I felt a strange mix of guilt and relief. I hadn't meant to blow up his world, but the truth was out, and it was only a matter of time before it reached Abigail. My phone buzzed again. Mom, with a frantic string of texts. William, call me now. The IRS is at the office. They took your father's computer. You need to fix this. I stared at the screen, my heart racing. The IRS. Grandpa must have reported the fraud already. I didn't call her back. Instead, I texted Lucas. IRS is at Dad's office. Shit's hitting the fan. The next morning, I woke to 15 missed calls from Dad. His voicemails were a mix of rage and desperation, accusing me of trying to destroy the family. I listened to one, his voice so loud it distorted. You think you can ruin us, William? Call me back or you'll regret it. I deleted the rest. My hands steady now. They'd kicked me out, called me dead to them. What more could they do? But the real bombshell came from Grandpa. He called me that afternoon, his voice grim. I met with my accountant, he said. Your father's been misappropriating funds for years. Over $200,000, 0 cents, William. My money, investor money, he's done. I leaned against the wall, my breath shallow. What happens now? I'm taking control of the company, Grandpa said, and I want you to work with me when you finish your degree. You've got a head for numbers and a spine. Unlike your father, the offer hit me like a lifeline. A future, a real one, not built on lies. But as I hung up, my phone buzzed again. Another text from Ethan. Confronted Abigail. She's falling apart, wedding's on hold. Thanks for being real with me. I stared at the message, the weight of everything settling in. Abigail's dream wedding was crumbling. Dad's empire was collapsing. And Mom was begging me to fix it. But I wasn't the villain here. They'd built their lives on lies. Lies that had cost me my credit, my home, my trust. I'd survived an icy road, a plummeting elevator, and a family that saw me as an ATM. I wasn't going to let them drag me down with them. As I walked back to Jake's, the Seattle skyline loomed against a gray sky. A city full of possibilities and secrets. What else was hiding in those files? And what would Abigail do when her lies finally caught up with her? One thing was certain. I was done being their pawn. The truth was my weapon now, and I was ready to fight.